I'll start off with a question to the Beijing Consensus. The Beijing Consensus is more focused on economic development rather than rather on the sustainability of the environment. And how would that impact Indonesia? That we know that Indonesia is a country famous for tourism, and then a lot of people come here for beautiful beaches, the mountains.
Beijing Consensus has economic superpower. It has brought 300 million people out of poverty from the last 30 years. And it has improved living standards, double standards every 10 years for the past 30. And it has and people in China and people who live with the Beijing Consensus, they live in harmony. So 85% of them are satisfied. And also it has political stability.
There's a deceleration on the Chinese economy using the Beijing Consensus. After 2 decades, from 7.8% of economic growth, it's now on 7.7%.
These are recent stats from 2010. Indonesia has 70% of its population live in poverty, which is less than $2.50 a day, and that's around 47.17 million of the population. So which consensus would be better to help Indonesia improve this?
I would have to say that it's quite obvious that the Beijing Consensus would better improve the quality of living standards among Indonesian citizens. You can just take a look at the Chinese economy. I mean, in the past 30 years, living standards have doubled every 10 years for the past 30. And as it's an economic superpower, it brought 300 million people out of poverty in the last 30 years.
Although the Washington Consensus is, you can say, has a lower economic growth compared to the Beijing Consensus, it is far more sustainable and allows people to innovate freely, therefore gaining more economic opportunities via innovation.
Sure, you can look at the US and say that it's quite a sustainable democracy, Washington Consensus, but that sort of system has tried to be applied in many Middle Eastern, smaller, growing, developing democracies around the world and failed miserably. And sometimes their lives were even better before democracy was brought in.
I would beg to differ. Indonesia has been a very sustainable democracy since 1945.
Very sustainable. So you would say that to the traffic, the pollution, the corruption, all the debates.
Given the fact that insurgencies in Aceh and Papua has been neutralized, given the fact that we have given independence to East Timor, and given the fact that Indonesia is now one of the considered more developing countries and has a very rapid economic growth rate, averaging 6%. Yeah. Very sustainable.
All of us know about the Chinese SEZ special economic zones, and those are open to foreign investments. And mainly, the foreign companies invest for the labor, because that's like one China economy's strongest point. And so, do you think that's good to depend on so much labor?
Washington Consensus is something for long term. For example, the 2008 crisis, they went down, but they came back up.
Objection. What if it goes down again?
Go back up.
Really? How do you can prove that? I mean,
Because Washington Consensus has been for over 2 generations.
I mean, last year the government got shut down. What do you say about that? I ask you a question. Would you rather have a roof on your head or the right to throw?
Alright, so we all know that the Washington Consensus has the problem of gridlock. It takes time to do any sort of reforms, but can the results of those reforms be justified by the time it took?
Okay, whether it is political or economic, it takes time for Washington Consensus, but it's really stable. Even though it takes time for a country to slowly develop and stay as the developed country, then Washington Consensus is the thing.
In Beijing Consensus, if they want a policy to pass, they just say it and it will pass. Then if it's good for the economy, then it will just rise. And if you see on the graph, if you see the graph of the GDP growth rate, it's rising every single year.
The Beijing Consensus was more focused on economic development rather than environmental. So if we bring the Beijing Consensus to Indonesia, how would that impact Indonesia's GDP?
Beijing does not take into account of the environmental issues that it caused because it only focuses on the economic development, which is going really great, sure. But economic development is not the only thing that a human needs.
If you're aware about what just happened in Thailand when the army coup over the constitution, and it is a result of people giving people freedom to choose their preferred political parties. It actually lead to chaos, which lead the army to overthrow the constitution, and that itself actually slowed down the economic growth of Thailand.